Silent protagonists are underrated as effective video game characters. A solid core of an identity can be detailed by game mechanics and colored by playstyle. When gameplay is allowed to stand on its own, a silent protagonist can slowly be built through player action, cohesive themes, contextual feedback, and encouraged deviation. While Chell from Portal may be just another in this group, her unusual games grant her a unique and overlooked personality. Often only seen as a player surrogate, Chell has an overlooked value as an extension of the game's design. The experience of playing as Chell can be broken down in two ways: learning the puzzles and executing a plan. When you're learning the puzzles, you're exploring the environment to learn what to do. Where's the door? How do I open the door? How do I get what I need to open the door? Assuming you're not save scumming like some sort of pervert, you'll have to make a plan to get the results that you want. Experimenting around with the tools at your disposal is basically required to figure out what works, and the game is great about making interactions feel chaotic without actually being unpredictable. Even rooms that feel less execution heavy can be satisfying with the planning alone, since the game is fantastic about letting you see your handiwork in action. Keeping track of the order in which to do things and which portals you should be using can be surprisingly challenging when you're dealing with volatile conditions. Not to mention how disorienting it can be to enter a portal at an awkward angle. Refining movement and portal placement is very satisfying, and adapting to unforeseen consequences can be really cool. Reacting quickly to make your portal that's blue shift to the perfect position is extremely gratifying when you pull it off without slowing down. Breaking the instilled, slow pace of a puzzle through quick action and smart planning can make you feel unstoppable, like all the opposing force in the world can't slow you down. Acting on a multiple-step plan smoothly has a cool, innovative action hero vibe to it, as if you're running on instinct and reacting with the smartest action plan possible while making it all look really smooth. Outside of the main hook of using the portal, you have a few options that reward the curious and aggressive. Throughout the chambers are these hidden radios that only make themselves known by their music. Not only does it take a lot of clever exploration to even find these radios, but there are hidden frequencies that can only be found by bringing the radios to the right spot. It's satisfying, but more like a slow build-up kind of satisfying, as you hone in on an approximate location and use your knowledge of the room's layouts to figure out where the frequencies are. Even then, actually obtaining the frequency can be really tough, since it often involves positioning your radio through either portals or throwing them through the air. Basically, finding the hidden frequencies is like playing the game normally, but with added layers of discovery, exploration, and experimentation. Part of what makes side quests very enjoyable is knowing that this isn't really what you're supposed to be doing. And Portal kinda has the natural extension of this: vandalism. Using your portal gun or random debris, it can be hilarious to mistreat turrets and security cameras, especially since so many of the methods available are so unintimidating. It's also fun to find the hidden frequency and then immediately ditch the radio in some dirty water. You ain't important to me anymore. Since you don't really get to destroy anything in Portal until the end, it's fun to find ways to mess around with the robots. The feedback you get from doing things you aren't supposed to ranges from obvious annoyances to cute distress, and it can be infectious to rebel, especially as options to fight back against the overseers are so few. From the beginning, the game sets you up to be boxed in and restrained, and there is so much joy to find in fighting back against the restrictions. And through all the exploration, through all the problem solving, and throughout all the rebellion, Chell is with you the entire time. The most basic way that silent characters become valued is through player expression or simply being part of an enjoyable game. Chell is scrutinized and categorized in ways that are dehumanizing and insulting for the most mundane reasons. In turn, this makes the optional organic acts of aggression work really well as a rebellious outlet for the player. They chose to say, hey, fuck you. The game's lack of lingering on any circumstances allows enough mystery to thrive to where a curious player can try to look for answers as to what's been going on, which again pushes the player to both rebel against the restrictions they're placed in, but also try to find stuff that's hidden, which the radios fit right in with. Portal is a game that emphasizes its characters' ability to make freedom for themselves, whether in rigid and restrictive environments or in their long, grueling escape. Chell may primarily be a player surrogate character, but when a game is as fun and immersive as Portal, it's easy to look fondly upon your avatar. Now, obviously a lot of what I remarked about is a glowing description of the game itself, so a lot of the value of Chell is easy to overlook. Immersive surrogate characters rarely ever get to any level of recognition without their name being repeated 100 times. So Chell is largely forgotten. To the public, Chell is seen as perfectly functional, but not as cool as the other silent protagonist from Valve. You may have noticed that I'm not talking that much about Portal 2, it's mostly Portal 1. And a big part of that is where I actually realized that I really grew to like Chell as a character. So much of Portal 2 is based around Wheatley and GLaDOS, with multiple rigid walking sections where you basically have no choice but to listen to a story happen around you. It eventually hit me that I grew to like the character of Chell and thought she was being disrespected as a character, and not even in the more direct way that the game was already doing. I figured that she'd find a way to have petty revenge, or not tolerate those she would find insufferable given her conditions. In games, it's easy to relate player actions to the personality of the character, especially with surrogate player characters. This might mean I was annoyed at becoming a background participant in the game, but in general there was a strong impression of you and Chell are not allowed to be involved. And if there's anything Chell didn't do, it was let restrictions and rules get in her way. Chell's story has her guided under a heavy watch to be tested on her ability to solve tests. She takes constant verbal abuse while being surrounded by incompetence, hopelessness, and eventual betrayal. However, she doesn't accept this and eventually finds and defeats GLaDOS. This might sound weird, but Chell's circumstances enforces her role as a player's surrogate. Being surrounded by high-ranking incompetence and contempt, but eventually achieving the means to fight back, is a cathartic payoff to a relatable circumstance, just with more violent robots. That element just adds a new layer, a clear danger and consequence to her rebellion. Despite the more direct threat she's under, she's too determined to let herself die, and too courageous to let herself stay still to share the fate of those whose markings have guided her. The story highlights Chell as someone smarter and more capable than those who surround her, whose determination and resolve makes her a threat to those who underestimate her. Much like how the robots always speak to Chell as if her identity is meaningless, Chell's look is visually removed from anything she does. She's dressed in all orange and is constantly boxed into enclosed environments. She's basically a prisoner. In Portal 2, the design is slightly altered, this time shedding the orange shirt and rocking a white undershirt. The exposed shoulders feel like a natural extension of the ready-to-work sleeve rolls that she has in the first game, as she's still ready to work, but now she's strong! Chell's presentation is more significant, however, for its contrast with the environment. The orange stands out amongst the sanitized grays of Portal 1, and her cleaner look in Portal 2 fights against the mechanical disintegration she's surrounded by. Chell also has a plain and simple look. Even though she's up against fantastical, seemingly indestructible robots, she's only shown as a normal human. In addition to this helping gameplay by making it easier to spot yourself through portals, this helps Chell's main role as a player surrogate character while quietly reinforcing that you're more vulnerable than everything around you. Chell looks like a normal human being. Nothing glamorous, nothing inherently attention-grabbing, and nothing unstoppable. This might sound counterintuitive, but it can be easy for a character who feels too special to alienate the audience as a hollow ideal of an unseen designer. But through careful management of Chell's presentation, she rarely ever seems like some bastion of perfection. This presentation reinforces Chell as someone who fights against the sanitized, rotting world around her, without sacrificing her role as an audience surrogate. Now that everything is in order, I want to discuss the most important element of Chell, how she has personality through the gameplay itself. With the portal gun, you don't move more than you want to, and you can go anywhere that you can put portals on. The game's structure of opening up after limitations are slowly removed pushes Chell to find her own freedom within restrictions, and then see what she can do once more tools are available. This makes the portal gun work both as a toy to have fun with and a tool to make progress. Thanks to her sweet shoes, along with no time limit to stir up any urgency, flying through the air just feels fun, so Chell just seems like she's having a good time with little to damper this element of freedom. Once Chell decides to make forward progress, she needs to be smart enough to figure out a plan that she can safely execute using the portal gun. As the player needs to experiment to see what works and what doesn't, Chell needs to be a curious tinkerer of sorts. Someone who can just mess around with what's available to find new valuable utility or knowledge. With little trial and error, there's less emphasis on execution than there is on planning, building Chell up as someone who can see all the moving pieces and understand how they fit together, especially as single pieces can be more easily toyed with. Together, this builds a solid core for Chell. Someone who has fun taking control of her circumstances and overcoming what restricts her freedom. She has the tools to be serious or playful, while having the curiosity and intelligence to make it all still have some value. Looking through the eyes of Chell is how the most important parts of her persona could be understood, but it's worth looking at how she could be read within her context. The control that GLaDOS displays has Chell greatly outmatched, yet she never displays any fear or break in her resolve. Chell's lack of any reaction kind of paints her as either brave or focused. She's unmoving, quick-thinking, and stone-faced in the presence of danger, even likely predicting some of these outcomes would happen. A natural example of this is at the revelation that there's no cake, and while the danger of dying in a fire is mildly annoying, Chell just finds a new path out with what's available to her. She can even find a functional radio in the fire. More than just an impressive showing of ingenuity, these moments display a fantastic sense of determination, refusing to accept her fate and turning her attention to the new puzzle of escape. While many of these qualities can be interpolated from any first-person character, Chell has a unique combination of bravery against targeted hatred and abusive indifference, intelligence regarding problem solving, and persistence in spite of unending deception with no haven in sight. As absurd as a lot of the game presents itself, Chell is displayed quite plainly, and any normal human who's been through all this could only be carried by their tremendous tenacity and unending bravery. An automated and oppressive environment would normally push slow action and timidity. That is, unless you're Chell, who fights back against those who restrict her freedom. Despite GLaDOS and Wheatley's insistence that Chell is incapable of nuanced thought, Chell has quite a ceiling on her capabilities. An innovative Chell has a lot of options to bypass obstacles, even though it's tricky to stay safe. And skillful play almost breaks the rules since you can avoid the seemingly mandatory. Expectations are soft boundaries that Chell can regularly crash through and prove her precision as beyond their calculation. Chell can also be very hostile against her circumstances. Knocking down cameras is like the pettiest slap in the face available, turrets only need to be tipped over, yet Chell always has malicious options, and even mandatory actions have enough flexibility to open up new avenues of cruelty. Given how carelessly the value of her own life is undermined, Chell seems like she's challenging what should be considered valuable, and vandalizing what represents her captors. A more passive contempt is enforced by her curiosity. Hunting for the hidden frequencies is like an extended middle finger as Chell prioritizes her own puzzles over the facilities and can even discover the facility's seedy underbelly. Her exploration feeds Chell a little freedom in constraints, while also learning even more reason why she should never stop fighting back. Altogether, the gameplay's core, optimizations, and divergences build Chell as a rebel who takes control of her situation. She has the mental strength to push through both physical and mental roadblocks, and still finds joy in toying around with what she has available, even her captors. As a piece of gaming history, Chell is unfortunate to be in an easy position to be forgotten. When it comes to people's memories of Portal, Chell is largely background. Gaming communities often overlook characters that don't talk, don't have extensive backstory, and aren't elaborately designed. If Portal 2 is any indication, this appears to be a principle held by the designers as well. A lot of the reason Chell was chosen for this was because I feel there's an understated value in silent protagonists. It enables characters who can focus on the task at hand, who can be expressive through action, and who can be anybody away from the action but needs to be someone once they're called on. A character can have value for what they enable the player to express and what they make the player find in themselves.